Welcome back, everybody, to the Phazon Labs. I am your host, Larry the Bearded Wonder. Joining me this evening is Isabel, the baby Bramman.
Hello.
And we are here to bring you guys Metroid game elevator pitches and fan fiction for new Metroid games because Nintendo refuses to make it themselves. So, and since we're not making and distributing anything illegal, we shouldn't get a DMCA. Nobody at Metroid, nobody at Nintendo noticed us. You see nothing.
Mm-hmm. You hear nothing.
That's right. Go make a game.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we jump into this week's pitch, you can and should find us at our home because we are powered by World 11, and you can find us at world11.podbean.com, all spelled out, all one word. Of course, also available in your favorite podcast feeds like Google Play or Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, a bunch of others. You can, of course, pick us up on our specific playlist on the World 11 YouTube channel as well. So we're around. There's a forthcoming Twitter account that hasn't been set up yet for classified reasons that we cannot disclose upon pain of death. And but once that's been established, which it will be by the time this goes up, you can look to the show notes down below and find us there as well, and chat us up on the Twitters. Because thinking too, what we're going to do is for each episode, we're going to put up a poll, and we just want to know, after hearing the idea, after hearing the pitch, would you play this game? Would you want to play this?
Mm-hmm.
And so just some fun feedback, just to see what you think. So with that said, let's jump into the good stuff. Last week we got another one from Isabel that she quote unquote aped from Big Troid on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
See what I did there? I
did. I do like that. Yes.
And I wasn't sure what to think of it last week, but eventually I ended up going bananas for it. So there's. So this week I bring you one of mine from the depths of my brain cavity, and we're looking at bringing time travel into the series because we've played with a few other gaming tropes, but as gaming tropes go, we don't get time travel much. And I like time travel. I like time travel a lot. It's one of my favorite things in sci-fi. God bless Doctor Who and the Journeyman Project, and all the good time travel things. Anyways, so pitch rolls like this. There's an energy beacon, a signal coming from somewhere, and Samus ends up tracking it down, finding it, and so begins our game as this anomaly ends up being a time slip, a wormhole in time, not just in space, and she ends up falling backwards through her own timeline over the course of the game. Now, the extra wrench that we throw in this is I'm canonically in my head setting this way forward to where she's aged, and the Metroid DNA from the vaccine that saved her from the X-Parasite starts breaking down, and the X-Parasite infection was never completely cleared, but that Metroid DNA was holding it at bay. Now the X-Parasite infection is actually getting to take hold and take over, and as she's falling back through her own timeline, the X-Parasite begins causing changes, and old standby powers and abilities start degrading and going away to be replaced by new, more organic-centric abilities based around the X-Parasite, as she's, essentially almost transforming / decomposing into an X-Parasite little by little. And what happens over the course of this game story-wise is that as she's falling back through her own timeline in events, that she finds out that elsewhere when she was there going forward in time, her present self that's falling backwards ended up being catalyst for various events throughout the different games until eventually, we fall all the way back past or before the first Metroid game in the series and way back into prehistory, and she ends up at the end of this game fully converted or taken over and turned into an ex-parasite, and ends up landing on SR-388, becoming the original ex-parasite on that planet, thus setting off all the chains of events going forward, like the Chozo creating the Metroids to keep them in check, and everything spiraling out from there. Which also that would make for a great title for this too, would be like Metroid Epiphany, but that's not what I'm going with here. I've got a better one that I like more. So, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I was thinking that if we have this, it would be more of like a closed time loop instead of like an open time loop, which is kind of like a weird thing, is that with a closed time loop is that there would be, like we wouldn't have any like shenanigans of like multiple Samuses coming in, or that kind of thing, which I feel would just complicate things even more. So let's just say that it's like it would be a closed time loop, and we just have one Samus that is going back through time, which I feel would make things less complicated. And then I do like this idea of having the this kind of like sort of heroic tragedy of her becoming this kind of greatest enemy, if that makes sense. And kind of like how she would, because I don't feel like as though she would go against this, do not go gently into the night. She would definitely be fighting against this. So I almost am like, there's like two ways that I feel this could go. Is that one, she's like constantly fighting against this, constantly, trying to find a way to stop this. And the other way is that she kind of like accepts her fate, but she tries to figure out a way to make sure that, nothing will, go wrong in the future, which also is kind of a way to fight against it. So that's kind of my thoughts on how the story would go. But I do like this idea of how, again, like this kind of like heroic tragedy, so I do like that idea a lot. And actually the first thought I had when you gave this idea to me was, and this is completely like way out of the park, like three stories down, is Luigi from the Luigi's Mansion series, of having like multiple forms or like cannon fodder, and like the idea that Samus could have, like multiple forms of herself that's like ex-parasites that she could use, to solve puzzles and that kind of thing. What do you think about that?
Ooh, I like this. I'm also mentally taking that and trying to roll it in with the idea that as she's falling back, she's not directly setting off events, but more that it's a side effect of something worse is happening at these specific points in time, and she's stopping that, or at least trying to hold off the worst thing that moving forward in time Samus would be oblivious to, because you're your backwards moving Samus is keeping those things at bay so that forward moving Samus never sees it. But as a unavoidable consequence, like each major instance of that causes something else that, you know, sets off another event wherever she's crossing her own timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it early on in this is an example in Metroid Fusion.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, she's started falling back, and we're in the events of Fusion on the BSL station, and come to find out that you're playing essentially as one of the SAXs that's running around the station, causing things to happen in the background. Like, I don't know, an example might be the, I don't know, power reactor's gonna, you know, overload and go kaboom, except as one of the SAXs, being able to direct, you know, some of the X parasites to cause like the massive vegetation overgrowth that choked it off at one point and cut power to the station. So you somewhere in the background caused that, but Samus in like current Fusion events never knew, just knew that the power got cut because all that vegetation choked that shit off. So
yeah, I could definitely see like that kind of thing happening, of the idea of like two events happening in parallel, but they are going towards the same goal. Well, I guess opposite of each other. Kind of what, sorry, I'm trying to think of, but yeah, because like if we think about like the SAX and how one of their abilities is to copy things, I think it would be interesting if Samus could fight previous bosses and you would gain their abilities, but as a consequence, the X would take the form of those bosses. So you would still have those same bosses that like the original Samus fights against.
Yeah.
But it would just be like an X version of it. So
I feel like there's a lot of really fun story potential in this.
and
the only thing that I struggle with on this is figuring out how to piece this together in terms of a gameplay, you know, a gameplay map layout. That's the hard part, because it makes it so difficult to have that full interconnected. But I mean, this could end up being a more linear-esque geared game, more in line with like Metroid 2 or Fusion. So
yeah,
but
yeah, I was actually thinking like it would be more first-person horror, actually, like Alien Isolation. That like you, as you go through, and like things change, your view gets more corrupted. I don't know. But it's interesting because they kind of already did that a little bit in Prime 3. So
a little.
Yeah, but like I feel like as though this one could be even more body horror, if that makes sense. So I definitely feel like as though this could have its own identity beyond Prime 3, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. I'm also thinking too, because again, this is a thing. It's turning into a thing for me, but I'm thinking how much they could lean into the kind of the body horror aspect in terms of taking, and here by the way is a game with idea with a great reason to actually recycle old Metroid music.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, take some of those tracks from various games along the series is you're falling back through those events and put kind of like almost like a nightmare twist on it.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, like as you go backwards, like it starts off, kind of like chill, kind of the more like chill, more choral tracks, and then as it gets further back, or forward in the game, it just becomes more and more twisted. Ooh, I like that a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I definitely could see this being more of like I said, like a first-person horror experience, but like also kind of leaning more into like the psychological horror too, because like I can imagine, as I said before, that Samus definitely wouldn't take this lying down. She would definitely be fighting this as hard as she could, or at least fighting to make the world that she's leaving, not completely suck, when she inevitably turns into an ex-parasite. So maybe at the very end, she somehow like leaves a message for the Chozo to make these Metroids or something like that, or don't come to SR388, and the Chozo misinterpret that and they're like, hey, this sounds like a good planet to come to. So something like that could definitely set things into motion, I feel. But yeah, no, I feel like as though it could definitely lean into that psychological horror, which I feel has been sort of done in games, but I don't know if it's been done with a deft touch. It's been pretty heavy-handed, I feel. So I think that this one could be a little more deft, I feel.
Yeah, there's a lot you could do with like character exploration with this if you think about it. I mean, essentially, seeing ramifications of your own actions from the outside and in the opposite direction, and accepting your own responsibility in events and all that. Because I part of me, kind of keeps it in the back of my head canon that she carries around some significant guilt for, fairly sizable, destruction. There's been at least a couple of planets that she's kaboomed along the way. So, but no, that's my thoughts. You got any others you want to toss in before we put a title and a bow on this?
So I did have one thing. So like I said, I feel like as though the one thing that could be a good gameplay loop is that you're fighting original bosses from the series, and as you fight them, you would gain like their abilities. Kind of like how, like when you fight them in Fusion, they've stolen your weapons, that kind of thing. But I feel like as though that could be played with a little more, and like definitely like emphasize the kind of like the more interesting aspects of like the bosses. Like you could fight against like a Arachnus or something like that, and instead of him giving you the morph ball, you would get like a roll attack or something like that, or something like that. Just like something, being able to play with those kind of like abilities instead of like the usual power set, if that makes sense.
It does, and your callback just gave me a great thought too. I'm seeing in my head now, and there's probably a few sections where you could like dabble with this, but when we get to when she gets to the point where we're going back through the events of Return of Samus Returns, that it becomes it almost becomes a callback to Fusion, because at this point you're becoming very considerably X-Parasite, rolling through SR388 with a whole bunch of Metroids on it, and you're looking more and more like dinner.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling, there's an opportunity for kind of a
stealth,
a stealth and stalker-esque situation here, kind of like what was in Fusion with the SAX, tracking you throughout the game. You could probably get a touch of that in there. That'd be cool.
Yeah,
God,
I like that
thought.
I do like that idea a lot, because like I feel like that could definitely, like you said, lean into the both with like Samus fighting against the X infection, and then also trying to fight against these Metroids who are trying to destroy her. So it's a lot of stress on that part, lean into the kind of the psychological horror kind of aspect of that kind of thing. So definitely, put in a sanity meter, something like that. Probably not that, but something like that, and just make everything go crazy. Yeah. But
I'm sure there'd be a neat way to play with that. I'd have to think on that, but there's I feel like there's definitely something there. So
yeah. All right. So what was your title that you wanted to give it?
All right. So the original thought, just for show notes, for keeping track of all this, was Metroid Eternity. No, you know what? I got a better thought. Given the way that this starts and ends, and what it potentially sets up, Metroid Ouroboros.
Oh yeah, because Ouroboros is the snake that eats its tail, right?
The snake that eats itself, yeah.
Oh, I do like that a lot.
It is the closed loop, the beginning and the end.
Yes, I do like that a lot. Yeah, because again, like it goes back to the closed loop, and yes.
Not to mention that just has pure sci-fi, box art appeal.
Yes, I like that a lot. Yes.
But so that's what I got for this week. Want to say thank you to Isabel, and thank you to everybody that tuned in this week. And make sure you go hit up the Twitter and let us know if Metroid Ouroboros is something that you'd play. And we'll see you all next week here at Phazon Labs. Good night, everybody.
Bye.